It was a Monday morning that felt like any other at Willow Creek High School. The sun streamed through the tall windows of the hallways, casting long shadows across the lockers where students were already lining up, chatting and laughing as they made their way to their first classes. The scent of fresh notebooks and sharpened pencils filled the air, blending with the faint aroma of cafeteria coffee brewing in the distance. Teachers stood at their doors, greeting familiar faces and calling out reminders about homework or upcoming tests. The bell rang sharply at 8:05, a sound so routine it barely registered, and the halls quickly emptied as students filtered into classrooms, ready to settle in for a day of lessons. In Mrs. Daniels's English class, the usual morning banter was underway. She was writing the day's agenda on the board, an essay on symbolism in *To Kill a Mockingbird*, while a few students whispered quietly, swapping weekend stories. Down the hall, Mr. Thompson was scribbling equations on the whiteboard in calculus, his voice calm and steady as he explained the chain rule. The atmosphere was unhurried and safe, the kind of predictable normal that made everyone feel secure in the walls of their school. Outside, the oak trees lining the campus swayed gently in the breeze, a peaceful backdrop to an otherwise ordinary day. In the cafeteria, the clatter of trays and the murmur of conversations created a comforting hum. Freshmen nervously navigated the crowded tables, while seniors lounged in their usual spots, phones in hand, scrolling through social media or discussing weekend plans. The janitor swept quietly in the corner, humming a tune as he went about his morning routine. It was a scene that repeated itself day after day, a rhythm of school life that everyone knew by heart. Across campus, the gym was alive with the sounds of basketballs bouncing and sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Coach Ramirez was pacing the sidelines, shouting encouragements to the players as they practiced drills. The cheerleaders were practicing their routines nearby, their laughter ringing out as they perfected their formations. It was a typical Monday, the kind where nothing special seemed to be happening, where the biggest concern was whether the upcoming math quiz would be as hard as everyone feared. Back in the classrooms, students settled into their seats. Some flipped open textbooks, others pulled out laptops or tablets, ready to dive into the day's work. Teachers adjusted their lesson plans, called attendance, and prepared to engage their classes. The hum of quiet conversation filled the rooms, punctuated by the occasional question or comment. It was, in every way, a normal school day. In the library, a small group of students clustered around a table piled high with books. They whispered excitedly about a group project, their voices low so as not to disturb the others. The librarian moved quietly between the shelves, shelving returned books and recommending titles to students who sought her help. The air was cool and still, a refuge from the bustle of the rest of the school. Hall monitors walked their usual routes, nodding to passing students and occasionally reminding someone to keep the noise down. The front office buzzed with activity as secretaries answered phones and organized paperwork. Outside, the parking lot was filling up with cars, parents dropping off their kids who bounded up the steps and through the doors with backpacks slung over their shoulders. Everything was calm, predictable, and safe. Then, just as the first period was well underway, the sudden crackle of the intercom shattered the quiet. The sharp, urgent voice of Principal Harris echoed through the loudspeakers, cutting through the normal classroom chatter like a knife. "Attention all students and staff," he said, his tone serious and steady but unmistakably urgent. "This is a lockdown. Please lock all doors immediately, stay away from windows, and remain silent. Await further instructions." The word lockdown hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. Confusion rippled through the hallways and classrooms alike. Students glanced at one another, eyes wide and uncertain. Teachers stood frozen for a moment, then quickly moved into action, locking doors and pulling blinds down over windows. Whispered questions and nervous glances filled the room as everyone tried to make sense of what was happening. In Mrs. Daniels's classroom, she swiftly turned off the lights and signaled for everyone to move to the back corner of the room, away from the door and windows. The usual chatter died instantly as her students complied, their smiles replaced by anxious frowns. Phones were silenced, and the only sound was the faint rustle of papers and the occasional quick breath as they settled into the tense silence. Down the hall, Mr. Thompson closed the door and pulled the blinds shut, his face tight with concern, though he tried to maintain a calm demeanor for the sake of his students. "Stay quiet, everyone," he whispered, moving to stand near the door. Outside, the hallway was eerily still, the usual sounds of footsteps and lockers slamming replaced by an unnatural quiet. In the cafeteria, students froze mid-bite, eyes darting around as staff hurried to secure the large double doors. The gym echoed with the sudden halt of basketball drills as Coach Ramirez gathered his team, pulling them into the locker room away from the windows. The cheerleaders stopped mid-routine, their smiles fading as they huddled together in a corner. The library's tranquility was broken by the lockdown announcement, and the students there quickly closed their books and moved toward the back of the room, guided by the librarian who locked the main door and turned off the lights. Outside the classrooms, the hall monitors exchanged nervous looks, their usual patrol replaced by a cautious watchfulness. In the front office, secretaries paused their work, faces pale as they listened to the announcement over the intercom and then began to field calls from worried parents. The school's atmosphere had shifted in an instant, from calm and routine to tense and uncertain. In the classrooms, the students sat frozen, their hearts pounding, eyes wide as they tried to stay as quiet as possible. Some gripped their desks or clutched their friends' hands. Others stared at the door, trying to listen for any sounds beyond the walls. The shadows seemed deeper now, the silence heavier. Teachers did their best to keep everyone calm, whispering reassurances and reminding students to breathe slowly. But the fear was palpable, a living thing that filled the rooms with a strange energy. No one knew what was happening outside, only that they had to stay put, stay silent, and wait. Rumors began to trickle through the locked doors, whispers of a possible threat on campus, maybe someone seen lurking near the school grounds. The uncertainty gnawed at everyone, making the minutes drag endlessly. Phones buzzed quietly in pockets, some students checking for news, others desperately trying to reach parents without being caught by their teachers. Outside, the school grounds that had seemed so peaceful just moments before now felt vulnerable and exposed. The familiar trees, the parking lot, even the front entrance, all were suddenly potential points of danger. The sense of safety that had been so strong that morning was shattered, leaving behind only fear and uncertainty. Inside, the classrooms remained dark and silent, a stark contrast to the lively school day that had been interrupted. Every shadow, every creak of the building, every distant noise was amplified in the tense quiet. Students exchanged nervous glances, gripping their seats, listening for any sign of what was happening beyond their locked doors. This was no longer just a school day. It was a moment suspended in time, where routine was broken and the fragile sense of security was called into question. The ordinary morning had turned into something no one expected, a test of patience, courage, and hope in the face of the unknown. The lockdown announcement had barely faded when the tension in the classrooms and hallways skyrocketed. The principal's voice, though calm, carried an unmistakable urgency that rippled through every corner of the school. Whispers turned into hurried exchanges as students and teachers alike tried to grasp what was happening. Was it someone outside the building? Had someone made their way inside? The unknown gnawed at everyone, making the silence feel suffocating. In Mrs. Daniels's classroom, the air was thick with unease. Her students sat huddled in the corner, eyes wide, some clutching their backpacks as if those could shield them from whatever threat loomed nearby. "Stay calm," she whispered, though her own voice trembled slightly. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of a textbook as she strained to hear anything beyond the locked door. The usual hum of passing cars or distant chatter was gone, replaced by a heavy stillness that seemed to press against the walls. Outside the door, the corridor was a ghost town. No footsteps, no voices, only the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. But then, a sudden noise echoed, a sharp bang, like a locker slamming shut down the hall. Heads turned toward the sound, hearts pounding faster. Everyone froze, holding their breath, listening. Was that a student running away? Or someone more dangerous? The question hung unanswered, fueling the rising panic. In the neighboring classroom, Mr. Thompson's students whispered nervously. Phones glowed faintly as students tried to text their parents, fingers trembling with urgency. One boy glanced out the window, his eyes wide as he saw a shadow move rapidly behind the trees bordering the schoolyard. "Did you see that?" he whispered, voice barely audible. The teacher quickly shushed him, pulling the blinds tighter as a chill ran down his spine. The threat was no longer a distant possibility, it felt close, almost within reach. Down the hall, the situation was even more chaotic. In the library, the librarian tried to keep the students calm, but some were visibly shaking, eyes darting toward the windows. "Remember, stay quiet and stay hidden," she urged softly, but the tension was palpable. Whispers of "what if it's someone with a gun" rippled among the students, and the librarian's heart ached knowing how real those fears felt. In the cafeteria, the lockdown sent students scattering from their tables, some ducking under benches or behind the food counters. The staff locked the heavy doors and gathered students into small groups, trying to shield them from any danger. A few students sobbed quietly, their faces pale, while others stared blankly, as if trying to process the surreal situation unfolding around them. Coach Ramirez's basketball practice was abruptly halted as he ushered his team into the locker room. The slam of the heavy door echoed like a final barrier between safety and threat. The players sat on benches, breathing heavily, eyes wide with fear. "Nobody makes a sound," the coach whispered fiercely. "We stick together. We're safe here." But even as he said the words, he couldn't shake the knot of anxiety twisting in his stomach. Rumors began swirling through the locked classrooms and corridors like wildfire. Some students whispered that a suspicious person had been spotted lurking near the north entrance, pacing back and forth with no clear purpose. Others claimed to have heard shouting outside or seen police cars arriving on campus, their flashing lights casting eerie colors through the windows. Every new piece of information, whether true or exaggerated, added fuel to the fire of fear. In Mrs. Daniels's room, a girl's phone buzzed silently on the desk. She glanced at the screen, a text from her mother asking if she was okay. The girl's fingers hovered over the keyboard, wanting to reply but knowing any noise could give away their position. She swallowed hard, the weight of helplessness settling over her. Around her, classmates exchanged worried glances. Some tried deep breaths to steady their nerves, while others whispered prayers under their breath. Meanwhile, in the front office, the phones rang non-stop. Secretaries answered with clipped, tense voices, trying to reassure distraught parents who demanded information. "The school is in lockdown," one secretary explained repeatedly, "but we have no details at this time. Please stay calm." Behind the desk, the principal and vice principal coordinated with campus security and local law enforcement, trying to piece together the situation while keeping the school as safe as possible. Outside, the school grounds were a flurry of activity. Campus security officers and local police cars arrived, their engines idling as officers spread out to secure the perimeter. Uniformed figures moved cautiously along the sidewalks, radios crackling with updates. The normally vibrant school parking lot was eerily still, save for the flashing blue and red lights that painted the asphalt in harsh, staccato bursts. Back inside, the lockdown stretched on. Minutes felt like hours as students and teachers remained huddled in silence. The initial shock gave way to a creeping dread, a sense that the danger was not only real but imminent. In one classroom, a boy's whispered question, "What if they try to get in here?" was met with a shuddering silence. The teacher's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of reassurance and fear she dared not voice aloud. In the library, a student tried discreetly to check the news on their phone, only to find conflicting reports online. One headline mentioned a possible armed individual near the school, while another reassured readers that the situation was under control. The uncertainty gnawed at everyone's nerves. The librarian closed the app and silenced the device, reminding students that the best thing they could do was stay quiet and wait. The hall monitors, normally the unseen guardians of school order, now walked their routes with eyes sharp and muscles tense. They whispered updates to teachers, shared snippets of overheard information, and tried to keep students calm despite their own growing anxiety. As they passed locked doors, they exchanged nods, silent acknowledgments that everyone was in this together, trapped in a moment of fear and uncertainty. In the gym locker room, Coach Ramirez paced slowly, his mind racing. He tried to focus on the faces of his players, on their safety and well-being, but his thoughts kept drifting to the unknown outside. "Stay focused," he told them again, voice low but firm. "We'll get through this. Yet beneath the surface, his heart pounded with the same fear gripping the rest of the school. Throughout the building, the lockdown announcement had been repeated several times, each iteration a reminder of the seriousness of the situation. The principal's voice came over the intercom again, urging calm and cooperation, but the message could not erase the mounting unease. Students pressed their backs against walls, huddled in corners, clinging to the fragile hope that this would end soon, and safely. And then, as the lockdown stretched beyond what anyone expected, the uncertainty deepened. Parents called repeatedly to the school, demanding information. Students texted friends and family, desperate to connect. Teachers tried to maintain control while managing their own fears. The school had been plunged into chaos, and the question everyone grappled with was the same: what was the threat, and how close was it really? In Mrs. Daniels's classroom, a girl's whispered sob was quickly hushed by her classmates. A boy rubbed his eyes, trying to fight back tears. The teacher's voice, though steady, trembled slightly as she reminded everyone, "We're safe here. Just stay quiet." But even as she spoke, the knot of fear tightened, a silent reminder that the lockdown had changed everything, turning a normal school day into an endless wait filled with doubt and dread. The lockdown had stretched on for what felt like an eternity, the minutes blurring together into a haze of fear and silence. Inside Mrs. Daniels's classroom, the once familiar surroundings now felt alien and threatening. The dim light barely illuminated the tense faces huddled in the corner, eyes wide and searching the shadowed corners for any signs of danger. Every small noise seemed magnified, the creak of the building settling, the distant hum of ventilation, even the faint rustle of a student shifting in place. The unknown threat lurking somewhere outside the locked doors had transformed the school into a cage, and the weight of that confinement pressed heavily on everyone's chest. Outside the windows, shadows danced across the walls as clouds covered the sun, casting dark shapes that flickered like ghosts. Occasionally, muffled voices drifted faintly from the hallways, a reminder that the school was not abandoned but alive with silent fear. Some students pressed their faces against the walls, trying to hear what was happening beyond the classroom, desperate for any clue, any sign that the danger was moving away. In the nearby classroom, Mr. Thompson's students whispered nervously, their voices barely audible. A boy in the back gripped his phone tightly, fingers trembling as he tried to send a quick message to his parents. The screen lit up his face, revealing the strain in his eyes. "I'm okay," the text said, though the nervous glance over his shoulder told a different story. The teacher caught the movement and gently urged, "Put the phone away. Focus on staying calm." But calm was a fragile thing, slipping through their fingers like sand. Outside the building, the tension was just as palpable. Reports had come in of a suspicious figure near the north entrance, pacing back and forth with no clear purpose. Witnesses described a man wearing dark clothes, sometimes seen carrying what looked like a bag or backpack. The uncertainty of his intentions gnawed at everyone's nerves. Was he armed? Was he waiting for something? The questions multiplied, unanswered and growing heavier with each passing minute. The sounds outside the windows intensified. Shouts echoed faintly down the hallways, followed by the hurried footsteps of security personnel and police officers moving quickly through the school. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, punctuating the thick silence inside the classrooms with a harsh reminder that this was no drill. The threat was real, and it was close. Inside the cafeteria, the students remained clustered in small groups, some sitting on the floor, others crouched behind tables. Tears streaked down the faces of a few younger students, their sobs muffled but heartbreaking. Staff members moved quietly among them, offering whispered reassurances and gentle touches on shoulders, trying to hold back their own fears. The usual clatter and chatter of lunchtime had vanished, replaced by a heavy silence that weighed on everyone. Coach Ramirez paced in the locker room, his players sitting motionless on the benches. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. No sudden movements, he reminded them, voice low but firm. His eyes scanned the small room, noting the pale faces and shaky hands. The uncertainty outside had seeped in, infecting even the toughest among them with doubt and fear. The coach tried to summon a calm he didn't feel, knowing that his strength was the only anchor his team had. Back in the library, the librarian kept a watchful eye on her students. Some were trying to distract themselves by flipping through books or whispering softly to each other, but the fear was never far below the surface. One girl clutched a worn-out novel tightly, her knuckles white, while another bit her lip, eyes fixed on the locked door. The librarian's own heart raced as she listened to the faint noises outside, each one a reminder that the lockdown was far from over. In the hallways, campus security officers moved with purpose, their radios crackling with updates. They communicated in clipped tones, coordinating with local police to secure entrances and search for the suspicious individual. The building that usually felt like a safe haven was now a maze of danger and uncertainty. Every corner turned, every door checked, was a step deeper into the unknown. Back in Mrs. Daniels's classroom, a sudden noise near the door caused a collective intake of breath. A shadow passed the narrow window beside the door, a security officer moving quickly, flashlight in hand. Relief washed over the students in a wave, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the threat was still out there somewhere. The officer's presence was a small reassurance in a sea of fear. Phones buzzed quietly in pockets, messages from worried parents and friends lighting up screens. Some students tried to respond, their fingers shaking as they typed quick replies. "Stay safe, I love you, please be okay." The emotional weight of those words hung in the air, unspoken but deeply felt. Teachers urged students to silence their devices, the need for quiet outweighing the desperate urge to connect. The principal's voice came over the intercom again, calm but serious. "The lockdown remains in effect. Please remain where you are and stay quiet. Law enforcement is working to resolve the situation. We will provide updates as soon as possible." The words were meant to soothe, but instead they underscored the gravity of the moment. This was no ordinary disruption, it was a crisis unfolding in real time. In one classroom, a boy whispered to his friend, "What if it's someone with a gun?" The question hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. No one had an answer. The teacher looked away, swallowing hard, her fingers tightening around the edge of her desk. The possibility was real and horrifying, and it colored every thought, every breath. Outside, the sky darkened as clouds thickened, the day's light dimming under the weight of the storm, both natural and unnatural. The school, once bustling with life and laughter, was now a fortress of silence and fear. The threat lurking nearby had transformed everything, turning a normal day into a nightmare. In the cafeteria, a student quietly sobbed into their hands, tears slipping unnoticed in the dim light. A staff member knelt beside them, whispering softly, "You're safe here. We're going to get through this." But even as the words were spoken, the room remained heavy with uncertainty. Coach Ramirez gathered his team for a brief moment. "Listen," he said, voice steady despite the racing of his own heart, "we don't know how long this will last. But we stay together. We stay quiet. We protect each other." The players nodded, eyes shining with a mixture of fear and determination. They clung to those words like a lifeline. In the library, the librarian whispered a prayer of her own, hoping for a swift end to the ordeal. She glanced around at the frightened faces, wishing she could promise safety, something more than just locked doors and hushed voices. The students looked to her for guidance, and she struggled to hold on to her own calm. As time stretched on, the lockdown continued without end in sight. The initial adrenaline that had sparked when the announcement was made had faded, replaced by a heavy, grinding anxiety. Every creak, every shadow, every distant sound was a potential threat. The fear was no longer just about what might happen, it was about what was happening right now, just beyond the walls. In Mrs. Daniels's classroom, a boy's whispered prayer broke the silence, "Please let this be over soon." The others joined silently, their voices barely more than a breath, a collective hope forged in the face of the unknown. The school had become a place of waiting, waiting for danger to pass, for safety to return, for life to feel normal again. Outside, the police continued their search, their presence a constant reminder that the threat was still out there. Inside, the students and staff held their breath, trapped in a moment that no one wanted but everyone had to endure. The lockdown was far from over, and the immediate threat felt closer than ever. After what felt like an endless stretch of tension and silence, the intercom crackled to life again, Principal Harris's voice steady but laden with relief. "Attention, students and staff, the lockdown has been lifted. The threat has been neutralized. A trespasser was apprehended by campus security near the north entrance. Please proceed to your classrooms calmly and await further instructions. The announcement echoed through the halls, wiping away some of the fear but leaving behind a residue of shaken nerves. In Mrs. Daniels's classroom, the words barely registered at first. The students blinked, some still frozen in their spots, others exchanging hesitant glances. Slowly, the realization sank in: they were safe, for now. The tension that had been coiled tight for hours began to loosen, and tentative smiles appeared amid the lingering fear. Mrs. Daniels exhaled deeply, the tightness in her chest easing as she stood and moved toward the door to unlock it. Outside the classroom, the hallways were alive with cautious movement. Students emerged from their hiding spots, some still wide-eyed, others wiping away tears. Teachers guided their classes with gentle hands, offering quiet reassurances as they walked through the corridors now crowded with students and staff trying to process what had just happened. The school that had felt like a fortress of fear was slowly returning to its normal rhythm, though the normal was forever changed. In the cafeteria, the scene was one of tentative relief. Students who had been huddled under tables or behind counters now sat at their desks, whispering softly about what had occurred. Some hugged their friends tightly, others stared blankly, still overwhelmed. The staff moved among them, offering water and comfort, their faces etched with exhaustion but also gratitude that the danger had passed. Coach Ramirez gathered his team on the gym floor, the tension in their postures easing but not disappearing. "We're okay," he said quietly, voice steady. "But it's okay to feel shaken. What we went through wasn't easy." The players nodded, some wiping tears from their eyes. The locker room still held the echoes of fear, but now it was being replaced with the slow return of hope. In the library, the librarian guided students back to their seats. The silence was replaced with soft conversations, cautious and tentative. Some students pulled out their phones, fingers shaking slightly as they messaged parents to reassure them they were unharmed. Others sat quietly, trying to collect their scattered thoughts. The librarian watched them with a mixture of relief and sadness, knowing this day would be remembered long after the threat was gone. Throughout the school, staff began to assess the situation. Campus security officers shared briefings with law enforcement, explaining how the trespasser had been spotted pacing near the school grounds and was quickly apprehended before entering the building. The man, described as disoriented and possibly mentally unstable, was taken into custody without incident. The principal and vice principal moved through the halls, addressing staff and students, their faces serious but kind. In classrooms, teachers carefully navigated conversations with their students. Some asked questions about what had happened, others just needed reassurance. Mrs. Daniels sat down with her class, encouraging them to share their feelings. Voices were quiet but honest, filled with a mixture of relief, confusion, and lingering fear. "It's okay to be scared," she said gently. "What matters is that we're safe now, and we have people looking out for us." Outside the school, parents began arriving, their faces a mix of worry and relief. They hugged their children tightly, grateful to see them unharmed but shaken. The parking lot, once a place of hurried drop-offs, had transformed into a gathering of community members, all trying to make sense of the day's events. Conversations buzzed with questions and shared stories, each person processing the trauma in their own way. The school administration scheduled a brief assembly to address the entire student body. Principal Harris took the stage, his voice calm but earnest. He thanked the students and staff for their cooperation and bravery, explained the steps taken to ensure safety, and assured everyone that measures would be reviewed and strengthened. "We're committed to making this school a safe place for learning and growth," he said. Today reminded us all how important that is. Despite the relief, the sense of vulnerability lingered. Students whispered about how quickly normal life had been interrupted, how a quiet morning had turned into hours of fear and uncertainty. Some admitted to feeling uneasy returning to their classrooms, while others tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. The school community was united in their experience but varied in how they coped. Teachers began to discuss ways to support students in the coming days. Counselors were available for anyone struggling to process the trauma, and plans were made for group discussions and activities aimed at rebuilding a sense of safety and trust. The staff recognized that while the immediate threat was gone, the emotional aftermath would need attention and care. In the days that followed, students shared their stories, some quietly in small groups, others more openly in classrooms and hallways. Each narrative was a thread in the fabric of the school's collective memory, revealing both the fragility and resilience of a community tested by fear. The lockdown had exposed vulnerabilities in security, prompting calls for improved measures and better communication. Parents voiced concerns about how the situation was handled, advocating for increased resources and training for staff. School board meetings became forums for discussing safety protocols and mental health support. Though the incident was resolved without physical harm, it sparked a renewed focus on preparedness and prevention. For many students, the experience left a lasting impression. Some found strength in their survival and the solidarity of their peers. Others struggled with anxiety and sleepless nights, haunted by the memories of locked doors and whispered fears. Teachers worked tirelessly to balance academic demands with the emotional needs of their classes, aware that healing would be a gradual process. Principal Harris met with security personnel and local law enforcement to review the response. They identified areas for improvement, faster communication, enhanced surveillance, and more frequent drills. The goal was clear: to prevent a repeat of the day's terror and to reassure the school community that their safety was the highest priority. Meanwhile, the man who had caused the lockdown was evaluated by mental health professionals, his motives and state of mind becoming part of a complex picture. The incident highlighted the challenges schools face dealing with threats that are not always criminal but still deeply disruptive and frightening. As the school slowly returned to routine, the echoes of the lockdown remained. Hallways that had once felt ordinary now carried the weight of memory. Teachers and students alike moved forward, aware that safety was not just about locked doors but about vigilance, communication, and care. In classrooms, lessons resumed, but the conversations had changed. Discussions about security, mental health, and community support became woven into the fabric of education. The school had faced a test, and though scarred, it was determined to emerge stronger. The day's event served as a solemn reminder that safety can never be taken for granted. The principal's final words during the assembly lingered in everyone's minds: we must remain watchful, united, and compassionate. Together, we will protect our school and each other. In the weeks following the lockdown, the halls of Willow Creek High were filled with a new kind of quiet, one born not of routine, but of reflection. The school community was slowly piecing itself back together, trying to make sense of the fear that had so abruptly shattered their sense of safety. Conversations rippled through classrooms and cafeterias, in whispered tones and heartfelt discussions, as students shared their experiences and wrestled with the emotions that the day had stirred. Some students found themselves changed in ways they hadn't expected. Sarah, a sophomore who had been sitting near the back of Mrs. Daniels's class, confessed to her friends that she now jumped at every unexpected noise and struggled to focus on her studies. "It's like my mind keeps replaying what happened," she admitted one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper. Others, like James, a senior on the basketball team, took a different approach. "It's made me realize how important it is to stick together," he said, his usual confidence tempered by a newfound seriousness. "We've got to look out for each other." Teachers noticed these shifts as well. Mrs. Daniels, who had always been a steady presence in the classroom, found herself spending more time talking with students about their feelings and fears. "It's not just about academics anymore," she explained to a colleague one day. "They need to feel safe, to know someone is there for them beyond the lessons." School counselors were busier than ever, holding group sessions and one-on-one meetings to help students process their trauma and rebuild their sense of security. The broader school community also grappled with the aftermath. Parents organized meetings to discuss the incident and advocate for improved safety measures. The school board responded with promises to review security protocols, increase funding for mental health resources, and provide additional training for staff on crisis response. It was clear that the lockdown had exposed vulnerabilities that needed urgent attention. 2 other schools in the district had faced similar lockdowns in recent months, each with its own unique challenges and lessons. At Eastside Middle School, a lockdown was triggered by a false alarm, but the confusion and fear it caused still left a mark on students and staff. At Ridgeview High, a more serious incident involving a student with a weapon led to a swift lockdown and evacuation, highlighting the critical importance of clear communication and preparedness. These stories circulated among students at Willow Creek, creating a shared understanding that the threat of danger was not isolated but part of a larger reality schools had to confront. The conversations emphasized the fragility of safety and the need for constant vigilance. Students and staff alike began to see their roles differently, not just as learners and educators, but as guardians of a community's well-being. In classrooms, discussions about safety became part of the curriculum in subtle ways. Teachers incorporated lessons on conflict resolution, mental health awareness, and emergency preparedness. School assemblies focused on building resilience, encouraging students to support one another and speak up if they notice something amiss. The goal was not to instill fear, but to foster empowerment and collective responsibility. For many, the experience of the lockdown remained a defining moment. It was a reminder that security could be compromised in an instant, changing lives forever. Yet, amid the fear and uncertainty, there was also a powerful sense of resilience. Students who had been terrified found strength in their survival, teachers who had felt helpless discovered new resolve, parents who had been anxious became advocates for change. The school community learned that vigilance was not just about locks and alarms but about relationships, knowing each other, watching out for signs of trouble, and building trust. It was about creating an environment where every student felt seen and safe, where fear could be met with compassion and action. As the school year moved forward, the memory of the lockdown lingered, not as a shadow, but as a catalyst for growth. The students of Willow Creek High had faced a moment that tested their courage and unity. Through their shared experiences and reflections, they were forging a path toward healing and preparedness, determined to protect the place they called their second home. The lessons from that day would echo in the years to come, a solemn reminder of how quickly safety can be disrupted and how vital it is to remain vigilant and resilient. Together, the school community was learning to navigate the delicate balance between fear and hope, uncertainty and strength, a journey toward a safer, more compassionate future.